And so Rob has needs that are unique and that they're at very high level. So his equipment has to perform, I mean, every single show. Because if you have an equipment failure at one of those shows, how many people would be disappointed?
Too many.
A lot, yeah. And so we've had the opportunity to work with Rob for many, many years, and A, he's a great guy. B, he's very tech savvy as far as equipment goes. As you can tell, he wired up the system and it worked just like that. I'm lucky if I could, well, I could boot the computer, but that's about it. And I could probably plug in, so that's about the extent of knowledge I have. But Rob's got it wired. And so we've had this relationship with Dingwall Guitars and Rob where he has offered input. And this is stuff that we can't get in our shop. It can only happen through him going out and testing things on the road. And how many people are familiar with Epica's music? We have a few here. How would you describe it?
Symphonic metal?
Symphonic metal.
Okay, so 2 guitars, keyboard, a drummer with, I think, the fastest feet I've ever seen in my life. He can drum roll with his feet. And so the mix is very dense. Symphonic, dense. And so Rob's bass tone has to be very specific to be able to cut through all those instruments. And they're all excellent musicians, all classically trained. Amazing music. If you've ever had a chance, or never had a chance to see Epica, I highly recommend it. No matter what kind of music you're into, they do such a good job that you will enjoy the show no matter what. And so his input has been incredibly valuable for us to learn how to build a bass that works in a really competitive, sonically landscape. And so some of the things that Rob has influenced on our designs is we were already doing 3 pickups, but him and his tech came up with a switching system that allowed us to do all 3 pickups on at once, and that created this huge bottom end tone that still had some top end cut, and so it filled and supported all these instruments, but also wasn't crushed by them. And we've been working so closely that we started thinking, you know what, Rob kind of needs his own signature model. And so those first notes that you just heard was Rob playing for the very first time on his own signature model, the Rob Van Roo signature d-roc. He hasn't touched this bass until 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, and this was the first time he plugged in, so you all witnessed him playing that bass for the very first time. It's had a sign on it all weekend at this show, and then last weekend at the London show, Rob's bass, please do not touch. Now, we were already building an instrument very similar to this, and this year, it was not our choice initially, but we embraced it, that we would change up the body style to make it a little bit more sleek. We added a cut here and a cut here, and that reduced the weight of the instrument by 200 grams roughly. It also added a bit of a tuning fork effect, and so we ended up with a bass that actually sounds better than the original model that it was designed after. And then Rob asked for something. How many people have ever seen an onboard distortion on a bass? I don't see any hands.
Over there.
We've seen one? Okay.
Spinal Tap.
2? 3? What's that?
Dead batteries.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So this isn't the first, but it is not a very common feature. And initially, when you first brought it up to me, I was like, why would you want distortion on bass? So now I'm letting you answer that.
Well, actually, that was a little bit of a little incident. Because I remember when you built my first bass, that was a Super J bass, those with 3 pickups. And the guys from Darkless came to me and said, oh man, it would be so cool if you could use our preamp. And I said, wait a minute, you wanted to put like a B7K old pedal on that? It was like, oh, that wouldn't be such a bad idea. It was actually aiming for the tone capsule, which is just like a preamp with bass, mid-treble. I said, okay, that's interesting actually, because the thing is, when I'm on tour, I always play with in-ear. I never play with an amp. And that's the most direct sound you can get. And I'm always using the B7K pedal from Darkglass, which is a very direct sound. And what I noticed is that, especially when I switch between fingerstyle and plectrum, which I do on a regular bass, it's always cool to, if you have the option to switch a little bit in your, well, I would say overdrive tone. But it's impossible. I mean, I can be starting switching between pedals all the time and everything, but that doesn't work for me. So I thought that would really be like a cool idea to do this on board, so I can do it while I'm playing. And this, believe me, it's just a little tiny detail, but it can change a lot for your overall sound and also the way you're playing, of course. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the main idea, actually.
Also, you guys play with a very clean stage setup. There are no amps on stage, no pedal board. You don't have a pedal board on stage.
It's like this.
Okay, you have a
but
small one?
Yeah, it's built in the rack.
Yeah, so it's in a rack, it's not accessible. So now you have control over some more tonal colors at your fingertips. You mentioned something interesting though, and that was you play both fingerstyle and with a plectrum or a pick. Now that's a pretty controversial thing to do. Can you just explain the advantages of using your fingers and the advantages of using a pick? You use them alternately for different purposes.
Most of all, when people ask me, like, when do you use a pick or when do you use fingerstyle, I always answer, it doesn't depend on how fast you can play, because that's like the biggest excuse that I hear from a lot of metal bass players. For me, it all depends on the song. The thing is with the pick is like, well, what Sheldon said before, what I need in Epica, for instance, if you want to hear the bass, it really has to cut through. And if I use a plectrum or pick or whatever you want to call it, it really cuts through the mix. And sometimes that's a really cool addition to the guitar riffs, the fast bass drum. But sometimes we have these open, clean parts, verses or whatever you want to call them, or ballads. And then it's cool if you have a little bit more of a round sound, and then I would definitely prefer to play fingerstyle. So it's definitely a choice of sound color, basically. Makes sense, right?
Did you start on bass with a pick or with your fingers?
Fingers.
So you had to learn to play with a pick.
Yep.
You know, I can't remember learning to play with a pick, but my daughter is here, and she's learning to play guitar, and she plays fingerstyle, and in watching her trying to learn to use the pick, it is very awkward when you first start holding a pick, and so I can see why a lot of bass players would go, it's not for me, give me my fingers. But it is a very valuable tool for a certain type of tone and a certain type of cut. So back to the bass. What we have here is our standard master volume and our standard d-roc. I have to say d-roc now. Selector switch, and this is the design that Rob and his tech came up with. And then here's this custom circuit by Darkglass, and we've worked very closely with Darkglass for a number of years. Rob mentioned the tone capsule, and the tone capsule was, of course, Doug Castro's design with some input from myself, some input from Nolly, but I think I tell the story all the time because I think it's just hilarious. The tone capsule was conceived of in Disneyland. We were sitting at a table at a restaurant in Disneyland talking about preamps, and it's the most magical place on earth, and that's where this preamp was conceived of. And it happened really, really fast. It was just like probably 2 or 3 minutes, days of talking about it, and then when it gelled, it was a 3-minute conversation, and bang. You can see Doug's eyes just kind of glaze over, and yeah, okay, I got it. The guy's very brilliant. So what it is the distortion is always on. And all you do is you just blend in how much you'd like to hear. So there's always a clean signal being sent to the amp. The distortion's always on, but it's controlled by a blend. So you can add as little or as much as you'd like. And to be honest, it's a very subtle amount that we've added. And then the tone control is on the distortion side only. So it allows you to get anywhere from like a vintage tube amp type tone to a more modern buzzy type of distortion. And Rob, would you mind just playing around with it and showing people what it can do?
Sure. First of all, also this is a push-pull button, of course. Yes.
If you pull it, This is passive, so you don't hear any distortion whatsoever. Okay. What you hear right now, this is the 3 pickup selection you hear right now. Let me switch between those. This is bridge. Bridge mid. There's a little bit of the humbucker kind of sound. Mid pickup. A little bit more rock and roll kind of sound. And 3 pickups. So there's a lot of man to it. Okay, let's switch on the distortion or overdrive. Okay. Here we go. Subtle. Let's blend it in. Let's make it a little bit more subtle. Tone. Kind of goes all the way.
Now, an interesting thing to me is that when I was growing up, bass was traditionally clean, and amp manufacturers were trying to come up with the cleanest, most powerful signal they could. Now, when you start soloing some of the famous bass lines that we all listened to as we were growing up, a lot of them were pretty actually distorted. Can you explain how distortion is useful in your style of music, or any style of music?
Well, actually, for our music, it's basically the definition. Let me also explain how my floorboard works. Like I said, it's a very small floorboard. I work with a clean signal, clean DI, and I work with the Darkless B7K. And what our sound guy basically does, he uses the clean signal, and he puts a lot of compression on it, especially for the low end. And he basically doesn't use the mid frequencies or the high frequencies at all. He uses the distortion for that. So basically, the only thing you do with the distortion is add definition to your playing.
So you're basically blending clean signal with dirty signal.
Yeah.
Because if you were to just use dirty signal, it would just be a big mess. Yeah. And that's the idea behind this. It's both clean and dirty at the same time, and just allows you to add some of that definition. Now you have some tracks loaded up. Would you mind?
What I can do now is, like, you already heard the sample, but I'm just going to loop a verse from a song from Epica. I'm going to put it on the clean, and then I'm going to switch on the overdrive so you can hear the overall mix, what it does. What you also can hear, at least what I always notice, is that it really blends well with the guitars. That's also something what I really like about this sound.
Exactly. I was listening from side stage, and I assumed that maybe it sounded similar to you guys, but I'm surprised. That's the first time I've ever heard an A/B like that, and I'm surprised at how much better the bass blended with the rest of the music.
There you go.
Like, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a little bit speechless right now.
But that's also because, also let me get
Something straight. It's not that I really want to be like on the foreground or whatever with the bass, like, oh, you really need to hear that bass, but I really want to add something. My function as a bass player, especially in this band, is actually to glue the drums and guitars, blend them together. That's what I see as my function, basically. That's what it does, sound-wise.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know what I forgot to talk about? This is Rob's signature model, but it's also a limited edition, and it's the Hellboy limited edition, and that's not his nickname, but maybe it should be, because you're probably the world's most biggest Hellboy fan. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I'm basically like one of the biggest Hellboy nerds on this planet, I can tell you. And the funny thing is that actually this wasn't my initial idea, it was actually Philippe's idea who came up with this.
Oh, okay. I thought it was
Yeah. Yeah, the funny thing is that we were talking about the signature thing and he said like, hey man, you need a signature bass, but it must be a Hellboy bass. I said, a Hellboy bass? What do you mean? Yeah, you're such a big fan of Hellboy and I can see that happen, you know, maybe like a big red bass or something, and it has to be, it's going to sound nasty anyway, so why don't make it look nasty as well? So yeah, you got a point there. So in the end, we actually decided to use the artwork of a comic called Hellboy the Wild Hunt, which is basically my favorite issue of the comic. I see you over there. It's also where the new movie is kind of loosely based on. And the cool thing is, like, I didn't have any experience with licensing and stuff like that.
Me neither.
No, there you go. So what I did is actually, I just sent an email to Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy. Like, Mike, are you in for, I don't know, maybe releasing a Hellboy bass? And he said, hey, that's actually a pretty cool idea. So, yeah, so we did some Skyping with people from Dark Horse Comics. And, well, here you go, there it is. This is officially licensed artwork. So, also for the collectors out there, I know there are already a few people out there who don't even play bass. They already want to have this bass just because of the looks.
Yeah, you know, I love the way it looks, and this was a completely new experience for us, and it was a bit rushed, I might admit, because the movie was coming out, and we had weeks to get it together and negotiate the deal with the artist. But they were really cool to work with, and they're also fans of Rob's as well, so it worked out very well. Limited edition to 100 pieces, and then Rob's signature model will continue on after that without the graphics. But really proud of how it turned out. Couldn't have done it without you. It's a real pleasure to have Rob here and have you here to share his experience with you, and thank you so much.